This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Kuf Beis. Tonight's shir should be a schloser for Shalem B'chaim Yisrael Moshe Ben Esther Rizal Yidumir Bini Kier Man Vavik Chaim Ben Sar Shalom Stephen Reza Idol Sarah Baskin and Delita Basim Bas Chayisa Yisrael Memindil Eliezer Person Mishavalei Shalom Bas Naomi V'Shev Feger Sheikhana Faldav Mini Teriva Shmuel Ben Tila Daniel Ben Chan Rizal and Chai Bas Min Librach Bas Tavi Musa Dina Idol Bashina Mindil Shmuel Tovia Bas Ben Abigail Fasha Stephen Feger Dvair Michal Zibran Atila Yehuva B'Soy Sharchli Yisrael Chosherik for Etalea Basita. Of course, Miriam Bas Esther Shendel, a tremendous Mazel Tov. Let's pick it up from the top of Kuf Beizam at Aleph. We're really in middle, really already got into this brisa, but let's pick it up again from the top just to get into the flow of things. We said Man Tana Akirais, who is the Tana of the previous brisa? The previous brisa that said that if you get up in the middle of the meal to greet the Chassan and the Kala, says the Gemara is Rabbi Yehuda. The Tana learned in a brisa. Chaveirim Shayimisu Ben Bakarag Leim on Kuf Beizam at Aleph. 2 lines at the top. They're for people who were singing and eating, and they got up in the middle of the meal. To daven or learn. When they leave, you don't have to make a new bracha. When they come back, into the bracha, no bracha rishayna. Omar Rav Yehuda was of the opinion, and again that Tanakam was like Rav Chisda that held you don't have to make a new bracha rishayna. Bracha achrayna. But Rav Yehuda says, it's only if some people are left behind. So we said that the previous brisa of the Chassan and the Kala is going with the opinion of Rav Yehuda, who says the only time you don't have to make a new bracha is if you leave people behind. If you don't leave people behind, then you just have to make a new bracha. Says the Gemara, great. Ela taima, what do we see in this brisa? Taima dimidvarim atunim bracha achrein the mekayman. That we're dealing with items that need a bracha in their place, which we said, and we explained extensively yesterday, meant mezaynes and amaitzi. Items that you have to come back here to make the bracha, acharayna, to ben shalamichya. The shem yaitzi, when you leave, ain't in a bracha mafreya. That's what when you leave, you don't have to make a bracha. Sheichayzin and do a bracha lechatchila. Avol, however, dvarim she'ain do a bracha achrayem mimkayman. Items that do not require bracha in their place, shahakola eitz adam, the brachas which are not as chashuv. Then what does it seem? Everyone's going to agree, even the Tanakama, Rav Chisda, everyone will agree that you have to make a bracha rishayna when you leave, and you have to make a new bracha rishayna when you come back. Says the Gemara, who is that in contradiction to? That's a direct steer. It's opinion of Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan we had yesterday in Kaval and Aleph on the bottom. Rav Yochanan said that when they make Kiddush in Shul, you're even say the din of wine. Rav Yochanan said there's no din of shini makim at all. So now we see clearly there is a din of shini makim. Answers the Gemara. Do we already have a question on the top of yesterday? We already had a question of Yochanan. So why do we need another question? Says the Gemara. Maybe this is also a question. Meaning, perhaps if you'll have an answer for the previous question, so not that we're adding insult to injury, but maybe this is also a question of Yochanan. Rav Yochanan says, no, this is not a question of me. The previous question on yesterday, 3 lines of the piece, 3 lines from the top, the Gemara concluded Tiyufta the Rav Yochanan Tiyufta. The Gemara is trying to add on, is this a question also? Says Rav Yochanan, no, why not? Because Rav Yochanan says the way to learn the brisa is you were just midayik, you just inferred that the brisa is referring to mezaynes and amaitzi. That's why you don't have to make a new bracha. But when it comes to shakul, you would yes. Really, the same din would be true by shakul itzadam. Nami itzar levarich. You also would not have to make a new bracha, not like the diak you just said. So why did the Brisa say Agur Agleim, which is a case referring to Mizaynis and Amaitzi? You know why? To teach me the power of the opinion of Rav Yehuda. What did Rav Yehuda hold? Even these items that require a bracha in their place, meaning mizaynes and hamaitzi, the only reason why you do not have to make a new bracha, opinion of Rav Yehuda, which was the same opinion on the bottom of Amud Beis yesterday with the price of the Chassan and Kala, is because you left people behind at the table. But if you didn't leave people there, it's a tremendous chiddush. Even though it's mezaynis and hamaitzi, you have to make a new bracha. New bracha rishayna. Says Rav Yochanan, this price is not a question on me, because the price is at the case of mezaynis hamaitzi to bring out the strength of the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Just to point out, big discussion which we're not going to get involved right now. The Rashbam over here, the Rashbam in the medium-sized lines, the Rashbam points out, what's the chiddush? What do you mean to bring out the severity of Rabbi Yehuda? So the Rashbam says, Misham de koyach ta'atira adif. I'm sorry, don't say ein loy merkach. The ein koyach an koyach v'chashivos im ein matzrich levarich. This varu, the Rashbam basically points out, this is not necessarily a general koyach ta'atira adif, as we mentioned many times, that it's more difficult to be lenient, so you have to be able to paskin correctly. Rather, this is, I'm sorry, I really didn't read the right word, because this is the reason is because this is a bracha. The Rashbam says it's a svara. This is just important for Rashbam to know, because it's a big discussion with regard to brachas in general. We all know that in general the rule is safik brachas lahakel. However, on the other hand, there's always the element of being Moisi Shem Shemayim Levatala, of saying a bracha. Levatala is a terrible thing, so that's always the weight that we have to know. But again, for our Gemara, the Gemara wanted to say that the Bryce is a question of Rav Yochanan, and Rav Yochanan deflects this question. Says the Gemara, Tani Kavase to Rav Chisda, we have a raya to the opinion of Rav Chisda, who was mentioned briefly a moment ago. When they come back, they don't have to make a new bracha, right? It's the opinion of Rav Chisda. Sorry, that not mentioned briefly. This was Rav Chisda that we had extensively yesterday. The Rav Chisda said, when it came to Mezainis and Hamaitzi, Dvarim Atuna Bracha Lachrem B'Mekayman, you do not have to make a new bracha. Tanu Rabbanan Nusagya. Okay, so we just finished up from yesterday. We just finished up the important rules, the differences between Mezainis, Hamaitzi, Dvarim Atuna Bracha Lachrem B'Mekayman, items that need to make a bracha Lachrem in their place, and therefore we learned, according to Rav Chisda, they're impervious to Shini Makim, you don't have to make a new bracha. Rav Yehuda argued, which was the opinion of the Bryce of Chassan and Kala, and then we learned the din, then we try to, whereas when it comes to shakalates and adama, you always have to make a new bracha when you change place, very important rules. And then we try to ask a question, Rav Yochanan answered. Says the Gemara, Taner Rabbanan b'nei Chabura, 4 lines at the bottom, Shei Mesubim v'Kiddush Aleim Hayom. They're sitting and eating, and it becomes nighttime. Mevi'in like kaishal yayin. You bring them a cup of wine. Va'omer alav kedushas hayom. First you make kiddush. V'sheni omer alav birchas hamazin. And the second cup you bench with. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. We'll look at a Rashbam in one moment, who's going to give us a bit more details of the case. Rav Yossi Amar Oicha v'hoilech ad shetechshach. No, you keep on eating. Basically, let's look at the Rashbam for one moment, and then we'll explain. The Rashbam says over here, Umafsik dam Rav Yehuda la'el, umi ohoil v'yigia shatz kiddush zar l'kaddish tchila. This is really going back a bit on what we saw 2 daf ago with regard to what happens when you're in the middle of your meal and it becomes nighttime. What do you do right now? So you have 2 things that need to be taken care of. Number 1 is you need a bench because you're in the middle of a meal. Number 2 is you need to make kiddush because it's Shabbos right now, let's say, for example. So what do? So if you decide, you take a cup, you make kiddush. And the second cup, you bench. Why? What's the reason? Because you have to separate your meal. You are having a weekday meal, then it becomes a Shabbos meal. So you got to make kiddush, and then you're going to bench. Whereas Rav Yossi says something very interesting at face value. Rav Yossi, no, you keep on eating. You don't have to take a break. As we move along, Talmud Beis, Kapezim at Beis, and then Rav Yossi says Gamru. You finish. What do you finish? You finish the meal. So then what do you do when you finish the meal? You bench. Remember, it's, let's say, Friday night right now. You ate all the way into Shabbos. What do you do right now? You bench. And then on the second cup, you're going to make kiddush. The second cup, you're going to make kiddush, which what comes out very, very fascinating is that basically the kiddush is going to go backwards. The kiddush is going to go backwards. There's a bit of a difficulty here in the girsa of exactly what's going on over here in these opinions. Let's leave that for now. But again, the machlokes here is, do you do kiddush first because you have to separate the weekday meal from the Shabbos meal? That's the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Or it says Rav Yossi, no, you're allowed to keep on eating all the way until it gets dark. And then what do? Then you bench. You bench because you just finished a meal. And then on the second meal, then in the second cup, you're going to say kiddush. Let's take one moment over here to see the first Rashbam on this page. We have a few minutes. The Rashbam here says, Hamazain says the Rashbam, Rav Yesi Kamerla, for Abuzu, she'enait sarach lekadish miyad. You don't have to make a kiddush right away. Al yimmer zudasai. You're allowed to finish your meal all the way till nightfall. V'yivarich berachas hamazin v'acher kach kiddush. And now he just points out the miu in paras map of a kiddush moed Rav Yesi the kolshkin shaber tfei. It's better to do what we saw 2 days ago. Spread out the tablecloth and be by your map. Dilatei mahachi eladavka kam Rav Yesi rishon mevarich leberachas hamazin kin shmuel damar kaman comes out the back and Daf Kuf. Shmuel's not going to everyone who holds like him, so we'll leave that at the moment. But basically what we're seeing over here is Rav Yesi saying you're allowed to first bench, and then make Kiddush afterwards. And again, the top places over here is where it points out the different Gersayis, exactly what's going on. But again, let's leave it for now. The opinion of Rav Yehuda saying you first split between weekday and Shabbos, so Kiddush comes first. The opinion of Rav Yesi says no, you let it keep on going, bench first and then make Kiddush. Asks the Gemara, what's going on over here? Why don't we say both benching and Kiddush on one cup? And the Rashbam points out over here, why we're asking Rav Yesi. According to Rav Yehuda, we understand why we had to do Kiddush to end meal number 1 and then benching. But according to Rav Yesi, that you're doing them at the same time, why don't you first bench and do Kiddush on the same cup of wine? Answers the Gemara, very fundamental. Teretz, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Shishas, Einaimrim, Shei Kedushas al Kol Echad. You're not allowed to do 2 Kedushas on one cup of wine. Why not? My time, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, She'ein Oisin Mitzvahs, Chavilois. We never want to make mitzvahs in bundles together. The reason why we don't want to make mitzvahs in bundles together is a very big discussion. What exactly is the issue with that? The Rashbam in the first white line points out the mechzel of kamasai looks like a burden. You're taking 2 mitzvahs and you're stooping and you're pushing them together. Looks like a burden, and we don't want to do that. That's the simplest way of explaining it. So we'll leave it with that. Asks the Gemara, "V'loi, is that true?" But Tani learned to the Brayso, nichnas the base of Moisei Shabbos. You come on Motzei Shabbos. Mavarich al yayin, v'ala ma'ar, v'ala b'samim, v'achar chaymer avdallah al kais. What do we do every week by Havdalah? Number 1 is we make Kiddush, yayin. We make a bracha on yayin. Then we make a bracha on the b'samim. Then we make Havdalah. And it's all on 1 cup of wine. And let's continue. Let's say you only have 1 cup of wine. What do you do now? You leave it until after the meal, after Melava Malka, and you do it all on 1 cup of wine. Then what do? You do benching and Havdalah on 1 cup of wine. Which also everyone should be bothered. How you let to do that? We all know you're not allowed to eat before Havdalah. Okay, so Farshim here explain. Maybe it's a tzairich, like because you only have 1 cup of wine and you need to use that cup of wine for benching. Many of us here are bothered who benches on lakais. That's a different discussion. Maybe we'll have a different day. But what do we see over here? If you have 1 cup of wine, don't go and make Havdalah and then eat, because then you're gonna get messed up. Because how are you gonna bench? So what do? You wait, you don't make Havdalah, eat, then bench and make Havdalah 1 cup of wine. So says the Gemara, we seemingly see that we make mitzvahs. Chavilois. Answers the Gemara, Ein loy shiny. When you only have 1 cup of wine, when you're in a situation that you don't have any choice, then it's different. In that situation, we're going to let you do 2 mitzvahs together. Asks the Gemara, what about in a case where Yontif falls out after Shabbos? Like this year, Leil Seder. Leil Seder is going to be Motzei Shabbos. So what are we going to have to do? We have Shabbos going into Yontif. So we all know, and this is really going to be tomorrow's daf even more. What do? We make Havdalah and Kiddush on 1 cup of wine. The Islay, we have another cup of wine. V'amarav yayin Kiddush ner Havdalah yakne. It says the Gemara that what do we see? We see even though you have more wine, you still are allowed to do Havdalah and Kiddush on the same cup. Now, why does the Gemara assume you have more wine? Because the Gemara is assuming we're discussing the Leil Seder. And the Leil Seder, you obviously have more cups of wine. As we saw in the beginning of this parak, the chashivas and the importance of having dalet kaisis. So I asked the Gemara, we see even in cases you have more wine, you're allowed to do Havdalah and Kiddush on 1 cup of wine. Answers the Gemara, Amri midloy Amr Zman. What did Rav say? Yayin Kiddush ner Havdalah. He left out the Zayin for Zman, for Shechiyanu. Michlal, what does that show us? The Shvish al Pesach Haskinan. We must be be dealing with the last day of Yontif, not the first day. That's why there's no Zman, there's no Shechianu. And therefore, what's the difference as well? It's whatever you have left to eat. You eat, and you don't have wine. And that's the reason why you do it all in one cup of wine. So Gemara is sticking to its guns. Generally, you should not do mitzvahs together. But in a scenario like this, that you have no choice, you only have one cup of wine, like Shvi Shal Pesach, when you run out of wine, you can do it all together. Ask the Gemara about Yontif Risha Dislay. What about the first night of Yontif? V'amar Abaye Yak Zina, Yayin Kiddush Zman Ner Avdallah. V'Rav Amar Yak Nehaz, Yayin, which obviously we do, as we're going to see in tomorrow's daf, Yayin Kiddush Ner Avdallah Zman. So what's going on? We see clearly that even though you have more wine, you're doing it all together. Why are you doing it together? What happened to the rule of Ein? Oh, you see mitzvahs, chavilas. We don't want to make mitzvahs in bundles. It appears like a burden. Answers the Gemara fundamental. El Havdalah v'Kiddush chad milsi. When it comes to Havdalah and Kiddush, it's one entity. Birchas Hamazon v'Kiddush trei milinenu. When it comes to Birchas Hamazon and Kiddush, then it's two different things. Obviously, not such a simple thing to understand. Let's take one moment to let the Rashbam explain, and then we'll call it a day. Says the Rashbam, halfway into the white line, Kiddush v'Havdalah chad milsi, tarvayu mishum kedushas yamim toivim ninu. When you make Kiddush and Havdalah, they both have an element of Kedusha Yontif there. Uba Havdalah atzma you mazkir Kedushas Yontif. In the Havdalah you mention Kedusha Yontif, Dam Havdalah Kedusha Mavarich. That's the reason why you got to make them at once. However, when it comes to benching and Kiddush, that is two different things. So Kiddush and Havdalah, like we will do this year on Matzei, on the first Leil Seder, Matzei Shabbos, which is the first night of Yontif, that's considered one entity. Then you're allowed to do it all in one cup of wine, which obviously we do. Whereas when it comes to Birchas Hamazon and Kiddush by Mlav Malka, you would not be allowed to do it. But we're sticking to the rule of Inois and Mitzvah Chavilos. And tomorrow we're going to get involved more in the discussion which we started today. This Machlekes Rava and Abaye, exactly the order of what you're going to do on Matzei Shabbos when it's the first night of Yontif. Obviously, we know we do like Rava, Yaknaz, Yain Kiddush Ner Avdallah Zman. Tomorrow we'll see all the Shitas and we'll pick it up from here tomorrow.